I learned to code in for the first time in February of 2023. And then I learned Godot and game development in February of 24. So about a year later. And then I really just kind of took to the engine and fell in love with it. I was just like, man, this just makes a lot of sense. And I already knew a little bit of Python. So it was really easy to just transition into the Godot engine. And all the nodes and everything just really clicked with my brain. And I kind of just became really obsessed with it.
From initial commit to published on Steam, how long was that?
Told myself in April of 2024 I wanted to within a year release a game on Steam. I'm excited to say it was literally a year. We're gonna work like 2 to 3 hours each weekday and like maybe a full 5 to 8 hours on a Saturday. Having someone that you've never met play something you spent a year making and have a lot of fun with it is one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. If you're interested in making a game, just make a damn game.
So I'm Battery Acid Dev, and today I'm chatting with PonderSoft, who is the creator of Bubble Battle, which is the first Godot multiplayer game using Netfox's lag compensation tool. Did I get that correct?
I think so. Yeah, I just kind of stumbled into that. I didn't set out from the get-go being like, hey, I want to be the first person to release a game with Netfox. It just kind of happened, and here we are.
When you first set out to make this game, what were you thinking in terms of like, okay, this is where I'm going to be in 3-6 months or whatever?
My initial plan was to create a retro online and local multiplayer party game. And, I didn't necessarily know exactly what that was going to look like, but I prototyped out a few different ideas, got the local multiplayer really good to go and was testing with friends, etc. And then started implementing just kind of the classic multiplayer synchronizer, multiplayer spawner, getting eNet set up, and then started testing on different devices. I was pretty shocked at how bad the lag and jitter was. So that's kind of when I stumbled into looking into different alternatives for lag compensation. And I actually found one of your videos about Netfox, and that's kind of how I first found out about it.
Okay, let's talk about the input lag.
Actually, what happened is I was still getting a lot of jittering after implementing Netfox, and then I just talked to Dusty in the server, or the Discord, and they were basically just like, yeah, you definitely need to get some input delay or input prediction in there to allow that buffer. And I tried to implement prediction, but it just like kind of sent my game haywire. Like it just didn't really seem to work. And Element Bound has admitted that input prediction can be a little difficult. And then I just implemented the already, out of the box input delay. And I found that, 3 frames was enough to really cover all the jitters while also still feeling really responsive.
And you use the out of the box, nice. And you use the out of the box setting that he had, or?
Yeah. So it's just one of the settings that you can use for network time, or is it a rollback? Is it the rollback synchronizer? It's in the project settings though. I found through lots of testing that input delay alone covered up more jitter than none, but without any additional display offset, it was still quite jittery sometimes, specifically with collisions is what I was finding.
Okay.
The sweet spot for my game, and this was really just through trial and error, was 3 frames of input delay and 3 frames of display offset. For whatever reason, made all of the collisions like no jitter displayed whatsoever. And I think even if you hopped in the Discord right now and said like, hey, should I use both display offset and input delay? They'd probably be like, no. But for whatever reason, it just worked for my game.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that like Element Bound and I were talking about is like there's all these like extraneous features that are there that you just basically have to experiment, and if it works for you then great. It's not necessarily supported officially, but if it's something that gets you there and it makes it smooth as butter like he would say, then excellent.
Yeah, exactly. I think even in his interview he kind of touched on this, but I hit him up about the fact that I was using input delay and display offset and getting better outcome, and he was like, I asked him like, is there any sort of downside to doing this or something? Is this like contraindication? And he was like,
Right.
well, if it works, then no, like just roll with it. He didn't think there'd be any issue with it.
So you started out, you were making this multiplayer game, and I think you went through what every multiplayer developer goes through. They run into that part where they start testing it and it just tanks because your inputs are laggy compared to your movement and things are out of sync. Did you find any other tools that kind of caught your eye, or did you stumble to Netfox and that was kind of it?
So I think you also mentioned the, what is it called, Netcode rollback add-on from Snowpet Games, and I followed that YouTube playlist along, and I thought it was really beneficial to learn the concepts of
Yeah.
rollback lag compensation. But from someone with my experience, it was sort of hard to implement it. I did end up going with Netfox. It took me a while to actually get there because I tried a little bit on my own as well first. And then after banging my head against the wall for a few weeks, I was like, hey, why don't we just benefit from someone else's hard work who's generous enough to put that out there in the universe for us to use? And that's kind of the direction I ended up going.
I think you had mentioned earlier this was your first game.
Yeah, this is my first commercially released game. I've actually never even put another game out on itch.io before or anything like that. So,
Wow. Okay, so your first game straight to Steam. Have you like collaborated with any other developers, or was it individual based project?
yeah, so primarily it was just a solo project. I had some freelancers assist with the art and sound, and I did even work a little bit with the Netfox founder Element Bound for a little bit of consulting as well to implement the Netfox add-on. But mostly it was entirely done by me, the programming, design, and I did a little bit of the art myself too.
Well, that's amazing. You went from not having a game to 0 to 60, and now you're on Steam and people are playing your game. So where did this idea come from?
I thought there might be a little bit of a niche for retro party games with online multiplayer because it just didn't really seem like many existed. There's games like Towerfall out there, but there's no online multiplayer in that game. I'm personally a pretty big fan of that game. So my mind initially went back to, let's take maybe an NES style game and make it really multiplayer focused and include local and online. Initially, I was working out like a Ice Climbers clone that
Okay.
had randomly generating levels because every dev, when they start out, they're just like, oh, I'll just make a platformer. Why not? It's pretty easy to do. After a while, that prototype wasn't really going in the right direction. And I'd always loved a game called Balloon Fight. It's essentially a Joust clone, except you've got balloons and you fly around trying to pop the, in the actual original game, it's just AIs. You're trying to pop their balloons and get to progress through each level. But there was a co-op multiplayer mode in that game, but not a versus. And I always really loved that game growing up. So I decided to kind of expand upon that idea and essentially just add, an intensive multiplayer experience into those mechanics. So of course, there's lots of different elements from the original that aren't in the original game, like power-ups and things like that, that sort of make it a different experience. But I found it easy to sort of just expand upon some already established mechanics rather than completely start from scratch with this being my first game. So that's kind of the direction I went. Yeah, another big thing for me is I wanted it to be really simple and very intuitive. So I was inspired a little bit because I was playing the game Brotato, which is obviously, a really high-selling Godot game, and you only use the joystick to play that game. I was like, if someone can make that much money from that simple of a game, which it has an awesome in-depth system, of course, I'm not trying to belittle it. I was like, why don't we just see what we can do with some simple mechanics and simple controls and have fun with that? So that was something that I sort of thought about at the very beginning, was I want it to be as accessible and easy to pick up as possible.
What was your process of the brainstorming, and then which mechanics made it and didn't make it into the gameplay?
Yeah, sure. So I have a very sort of cut and dry, maybe even boring process, if you will. So I just kind of mapped out at the beginning of this, like, here's all the elements that I want. So I want, 4 players. I want there to be, I want it to be a little bit more fast paced. I want there to be X amount of power ups, this many levels, etc. And then when I follow through that outline, of course, that outline kind of evolves and devolves throughout the development of my game, but it gives me a nice sort of overview to stick to. So initially I think I put down 8 power-ups. Only about 6 ended up making it into the game. So there's a couple that I left out that we can certainly talk about, but it was mainly for online reasons that I didn't include them because I thought they'd be a little too difficult with the lag compensation specifically.
So you touched on a couple mechanics that didn't make, that didn't survive the chopping block. Like what's something that you're excited to actually maybe bring back in for, version 2.0 or whatever?
So there is a power up in the game that's a pencil. And I initially, in my head, it was called a pencil, spelled Pensille, so like missile, and it was going to be like something that you could actually shoot at the opponent as well. Now it's just kind of acts as like a sword. So that was something that I sort of scaled back and still included. It was a little complicated for me to figure out, or I guess more so for the sake of I gave myself a year to develop this, like from prototype to release. I wanted it to be a year. It was one of those things that's kind of a time decision. I just decided not to try to figure that out. But I did have, the prototype in local multiplayer, and it was pretty fun to be able to shoot the heat-seeking pencil at an opponent to pop their bubbles. So other than that, there's also a ball power-up that sort of bounces around like a pong ball does at like sort of 45-degree angles. And initially you could control the ball if it was your power-up. So essentially when you have the ball, you can't get hurt by it, but everyone else can. And it just flies around the level freely, right? But you if it's your ball, you actually had the ability to kind of like collide with it and direct it in certain ways. But it was another decision where just I kind of wanted to taper down on the amount of collisions I was having to deal with shape cast and things like that with the lag compensation. I ultimately removed that, and just the player does not have the ability to actually interact with the ball anymore. They will just, if it's not your ball, take away a bubble if it hits you.
And when you're working with these different game mechanics, like what do you kind of look at for a gameplay mechanic or something that is striking for you? How do you know when something's good?
If you've played a lot of games and you have a good eye for detail, you can kind of tell. I'm sure that there's been a lot of bad games made where maybe that person didn't really have the good eye for detail that I'm referring to. But for me personally, I just kind of was like, oh yeah, no, like, why don't we give these guys swords? So I gave them the pencil, right? And like, oh, it'd be awesome if there was a ball flying around, or why don't we throw in reverse gravity? Like that's going to be super fun. And then I had fun myself just testing it, even playing against myself. And then, I show it to some friends and get some feedback from a demo online and stuff. And then when people start to kind of affirm your original ideas, that's when like, hey, this thing should actually stick.
So you said you just got some feedback from friends and maybe a demo play. Like, what was the worst feedback that you had on your game? Like something that you were like, I did not think of that.
Someone did say that there should be an option for 3 or even 4 bubbles. And my brain immediately was like, well, that's going to be a lot more frames of animation I have to pay for. So I don't know if I'm going to want to do that. Plus, I don't think it mechanically made a ton of sense to have. There just wouldn't really be enough space. Yeah, so that one definitely sticks out. But generally, people were very positive online. Every once in a while you get someone to be like, this sucks. But hey, it was free, so.
So how long did it take from, initial commit to published on Steam? How long was that?
Yeah, I'm excited to say it was literally a year. So I think it would have been sooner if I would have maybe known a little bit more about netcode. But that took up, about half the dev time, really, just getting all the multiplayer connections set up, the lobby system, all the UI to work to with the Steam lobby system, and of course the lag compensation. But so I told myself in April of 2024, I wanted to, within a year, release a game on Steam. And I really did finish it fully by about the end of March 25. And then the last month before release, I released at the end of April. I just kind of spent a lot of time doing marketing.
So you like the retro style game. Where's that coming from? You said earlier maybe from NES.
For some reason, I've always just really loved the games from the NES and SNES era. So in the early 2000s, I was just playing SNES all the time. Personally, the SNES art style is kind of my favorite. So if I was going to produce something out into the world that people were going to play, I wanted it to be similar to that, essentially. So there's certainly an argument for using vector graphics instead, a little bit easier to make. So I think it's generally a little bit cheaper. I could be wrong on that. But I just personally preferred the style a lot more. And while it may not appeal to maybe as wide of an audience, I was just like, if I'm going to make this thing, I want this to look like it's pixel art.
So if I hit these things, they don't hurt me, right?
No.
Okay.
Kind of just randomly shoot you really far.
Okay.
See if I can get it. I just like.
Oh. I got you while you were distracted.
That's all right.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's very It's very clever.
So this is actually inspired from the Super Mario Bros. 3 rotary lifts. which
Okay, yeah.
I'm guessing you're not aware of exactly what that is, but there's also a
Super.
similar, there's like spinners in Balloon Fight, but they actually don't behave quite like this.
Oh,
You ran into it right when
right
the
when it
collision
spawned.
turned on.
What's your technical background? Like, are you a software developer or are you a game developer and then you came into this thing and then you're just like, I just knocked this out?
I originally went to undergrad with the intention of going to physical therapy school. So I got into physical therapy school my senior year and then started working as a PT tech and just really did not like it. Found that was not the path for me. So I was a little lost, didn't know what to do next, and I ended up studying for the LSAT and going to law school, which was not the right decision. Only went for a year and ended up dropping out. And then after that, I worked in mortgages for about 6 years and had a pretty good career in mortgages, some really good years. And then market took a turn in about end of 2022, and I had helped start a new subsidiary of a company, so they actually ended up having to do layoffs, and I was let go. So I had quite a bit of time on my hands and a little bit of severance. And I kind of figured out that I really enjoyed doing a lot of the data analytics for my sales team that I was leading at the mortgage company. So I took some time to just kind of learn a little bit more SQL, Python, and stuff on YouTube. And then I started applying to a lot of data analyst jobs, and I've been in data analytics now for about 2 years. But to more directly answer your question, I learned to code in for the first time in February of 2023, and then I learned Godot and game development in February of 24. So about a year later, and then I really just kind of took to the engine and fell in love with it. I did Clear Code's tutorial, if you're familiar, which is it's like 11 hours or something. And I was just like, man, this just makes a lot of sense. And I already knew a little bit of Python, so it was really easy to just transition into the Godot engine. And all the nodes and everything just really clicked with my brain, and I kind of just became really obsessed with it. So then I just told myself, all right, we're gonna work like 2 to 3 hours each weekday, and like maybe a full 5 to 8 hours on a Saturday or Sunday every week on a game, and we're just gonna see where it goes. So I started that out in April of 24.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. I think anybody can do this stuff if they can just keep their head down for a little bit and maybe bang their head against it enough. What was some of the harder things as someone that doesn't come from a software engineering degree or whatever that you ran into that you had to kind of overcome to get this to work?
I think that really integrating the lag compensation was the biggest roadblock for me. So as I kind of touched on earlier, I was a little bit lost, but I stumbled across your video about Netfox and found it super helpful. So thank you for that. I saw in your video, it looked relatively easy to implement, but it required reworking the inputs. And I told myself like, like I don't want to have to do that. That sounds like a lot of work. I'll just try to make my own interpolation and input delay and all that stuff. Well, it can't be that hard, right? So I tried that for like a couple, 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'm just like, nope, we're gonna rework the inputs and start using Netfox. And then I also joined the Netfox Discord, and like you mentioned it before, I believe, and in that interview with Element Bound, the Netfox add-on creator, that is just an incredible community where there's lots of people in there that are just like waiting to help you. As soon as you send a message in there, they will get back to you immediately. So I found that community to be super helpful with implementing the add-on. And honestly, once I got the inputs reworked in my game, it was pretty simple to implement overall. I mean, there were only a few caveats that I kind of had to work through. For example, with the tick interpolators, so they're screen wrapping in my game. If you don't know what that means, it's where you can go, like, let's say you go all the way to the right side of the screen, and then it just teleports you over to the left, right? With the tick interpolator, sometimes teleport can cause a little bit of jitter. So I did have to come up with a workaround for that, where I ended up just using some area 2Ds that basically detects when the player is over there, and then it tells the player locally to turn off the tick interpolator for like 0.25 seconds or something. So it gets rid of the jitter issue that I was having with the teleport. But yeah, so that was really the biggest pitfall, if you will. And I even considered at one point, I was like, man, like I was about 6 or 7 months into the development, and I thought, maybe it doesn't make sense to put this one to the finish line. Like this is going to be a lot of work to get this lag compensation going. But ultimately, I'm glad that I stuck it out, and I learned a ton throughout that process. So I feel very equipped to make another online multiplayer game.
While you were developing this, were you stressed about is this best practices? Am I doing this right? Like, how much does that come into your mind when you're implementing a workaround or you're implementing some kind of mechanic?
That is a great question. So I do have a philosophy on this. When you're learning something, I personally just kind of like to get through it. Like I'm not gonna overanalyze. Is this the best way to do it? So I have other friends that are way more into like I want to really theorize about the best way and most efficient way to get something done, right? And that's really good, but sometimes you just got to do the thing. It's kind of what I think. So I personally am a kinesthetic learner. So this is part of the reason that I decided to do this year-long process because I felt it would be the best way for me to learn how to actually make a game was just go ahead and make one. Like, was I a little concerned about best practices? I mean, it's really funny because in the very like I've been working on it for a year, right? And since this is really about my first year working in Godot and game dev in general, I look back at some of that code from, April or May of last year, and I'm like, who the heck wrote this? This is absolutely terrible. But I also resisted the urge to redo the code just so it looks prettier because if it works, it works. And I think it's a little bit of a waste of time to redo it. I mean, there's certainly some benefit to setting up systems that you can reuse, and I'll probably be doing that a little bit more in my second game now that I'm a little bit more experienced and feel a little bit more capable to do that. But I mean, even at the very beginning of my game, I was rarely passing arguments and functions. So, and now it's like I'll pass like, tons of arguments and functions. It's just, you get in these habits when you're starting out. I was just gonna say we have not really had the shrinking of the level come too much. Like you've never even seen the end phase. So I don't know if you want to just kind of
Right.
like let this one go out to the end phase real quick.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll get a
I'm
ball too to make it interesting.
I'm
Or
gonna
you
try.
can get three, I don't care.
I'm I'm gonna try to get to that point.
Oh, to the end? Yeah, I mean it'll
Yeah.
it'll be soon. Like right when that bubble comes, that I don't know if you even noticed you can get a bubble back by getting that.
I did notice that. Yeah. I did notice that. Yeah.
So now it's starting to close in, and then like eventually the entire level disappears, and it's just like you have to fly, and basically, generally you're in the round, but there is a way to just tie if time runs out too.
I love this mechanic. I love that. What do you call that? That encroachment. That there's like a name for that in game dev world, and I can't
Yeah,
remember.
I know what you're talking about. I also don't know the name of it, but I picked it up from playing Super Bomberman.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is actually hard with three balls.
Oh, because you have to avoid them. I'm just hanging out.
Yep. But yeah, this
I
is what the end
actually.
game looks like.
Does it keep closing in, or is it where it
No, this
stops?
is it. Yeah, yeah. And then you
Okay.
get like 30 seconds from the point this closes in, and then it just ties if you don't
Well, I'll just.
have.
When you were developing this, did you work on your game mechanics first, or did you build a multiplayer base first and then build, on top of that? Like, in what order did that kind of occur?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I focus on the design and mechanics first. I always had the multiplayer in mind, and I just kind of told myself, let's make the local multiplayer work, and then how hard could it be to integrate online? That is actually not a great philosophy to have, I found, now that I've been through it. But at least it got me through that whole development process. So, uh, you know, going through this again in game number two, I would definitely design some things a little bit differently and probably now we can kind of see it through the lens of what's going to work in online multiplayer, what's going to be easier to implement, and all that. So I will definitely be from the ground up focusing on multiplayer for the next game, even though that was not what I did for this one.
Right. So you're in support of the multiplayer first, and then your game mechanics.
I am, yes. I mean, unless you were brand new like me, and that's whatever you need to do to get through making a game, do it. But yeah, generally, I think the best practice would be focus on the multiplayer first.
I think you just start with what's going to keep you engaged, right? What's going to be fun. Like I spent like 2 hours working on a loading screen the other day because I was bored coding. You just got to do whatever keeps your interest. Did you find that while you were working, you would just get to a point where you're like, I got to do something completely different, but I still want to be productive? Like what's an example of something that you did?
I definitely can relate to that a little bit. So, but I kind of have a process where the start of every week on a Sunday, I'll sit down and I'll kind of pick like 4 to 7 tasks that I'm going to work on in my game for the next week. I generally will try to stick to all those tasks. So if I do happen to get bored of one of them, and a task could be as simple as like implement player animations or player movement, gravity, those all could be specific tasks, right? So if I get stumped on one of those tasks and I'm not getting anywhere, I've tried 4 or 5 things to get it just right and it's just not there, then yeah, I'd usually pivot to something else because I think a lot of programmers in general would agree that if you kind of step away from one problem, if you're stuck and you start to work on something else, you can actually learn more and be able to potentially implement something back into that other problem that you picked up on while you're working on something else. It also, I think, helps to take breaks, like go for a walk or stretch, meditate, something like that. And a lot of times I would be at the gym and I'd have a solution to a problem I've been banging my head against the wall on, just pop into my head. And I start like going through in my head, oh, I'm going to implement that when I get back. And yeah, so
You're making progress with the game. How much did you go back and refactor, and did you find yourself having to rewrite a lot of stuff, or was it kind of that'll be for version 2.0?
yeah, it was definitely the latter. I sort of told myself for the sake of time, I didn't want to do a lot of rewriting. So I just stuck with that mentality of if it works, it works. It doesn't have to look pretty. I also didn't think anyone would ever look at my code base. That being said, I did end up involving Element Bound at one point, and I was like, oh boy, he's gonna think I'm the most rookie coder of all time. But he didn't say anything about it. So
During the development of the first game, Bubble Battle, you've realized that you would do some things differently. Is there anything that stands out that, like, man, I could make this an extension, and that way I never have to rewrite this code?
something that just comes to mind is I'm actually working on a reusable, reliable RPC multiplayer synchronizer because I found that there's a lot of events that I have to just manually code that critical game state, like the number of bubbles a player has, if a player picked up a power up, etc. And I should also clarify this reliable multiplayer synchronizer is only to be used as on change. You definitely do not want to be always sending reliable packets 60 times a second or what have you. But I noticed that I was having to write these manual RPCs, like there's like 20 of them on my player scripts, and I was just like, man, there's got to be an easy way to do this for the next game. So that's something that I've been working on recently, and it's actually been pretty simple, and I'm almost finished with it. It's just like creating a script with a class, and then you just add it into your player scene, and there's some export variables. It's actually kind of similar to the rollback synchronizer where you can just write some custom properties into it. So that's definitely something that for the next game will make some things easier.
When you're flying around, you're popping these bubbles. You're doing like a collision detection, and then are you sending an RPC? Like, how does that event get transmitted, throughout the peers?
Great question. I have no idea if this is best practices, but there are shape casts for those collisions. Then there's also area 2Ds that actually exist just outside those shape casts, like a pixel or less, something like that. So the shapecasts obviously are responsible for when the players actually collide to each other. And when they collide, it basically, for the bounce effect, you basically just do like velocity.x equals negative velocity.x. So it's just a straight bounce. So basically the force you hit the object with is the force that you're going to bounce back with. Same thing with vertically. Then the area 2Ds will detect, if a player has entered the bubble area of another player. And at that point, that is an RPC that is sent out. So I do have in the game, the server is actually the only one responsible for the area 2Ds on all the players. So it is sort of authoritative in that sense. And it will communicate out with an RPC when a bubble is popped.
Yeah.
And it's a reliable RPC.
Excellent. Yeah. And I asked because I think there's people developing games that are curious. Like, no one's telling me what to do. I hear RPCs and sync variables, and like, here's a real life, use case of it. So I just wanted to highlight some of those technical aspects. When you first discovered that there was this lag problem, tell me that story again. Like, I just want to hear that, okay, I have this game and it's lagging, and then where you went from there.
Yeah, so since this is my first game, I was a little bit naive at how good the just built-in multiplayer functionality would be for lag compensation. So I just kind of assumed like, oh, the multiplayer synchronizer will probably interpolate, right? Which I think it actually does now in 4.4. I could be wrong, but at least in 4.2, it didn't really do much. So I again, pretty naive. So I've just been testing a lot on locally with multiple instances. And then I finally get a friend to let me borrow their computer, and I test on 2 separate PCs, and it's just like totally unacceptable gameplay. And I'm on the same network. So that it was a little overwhelming because I'm like, wow, I thought this built-in stuff would be a little bit better. So, that's a bit of a wake-up call. And the funny thing is I was actually so confident about it. I was like, it was January of this year. I was like, great, I've got the Steam lobby set up and everything. Like, I'm gonna be able to market this thing for like 3 months and hit my goal of releasing in April. Well, no, didn't have the time to do that because the lag conversation took about 3 months. But so the process to more directly answer your question of trying to implement things on my own, I set up a decent interpolation process just with some manual RPCs that I was setting. So I was syncing position with my manual RPCs and not using a multiplayer synchronizer. So it's actually a little bit similar to what the rollback synchronizer does. I'm not going to say it's anywhere close to how good it is, but and then it was allowing for like 100 to 150 milliseconds of like input delay interpolation, and it was really smooth, but it just like it's just not that's not fast enough for input. Like the input delay I'm using in the final version of Bubble Battle is 3 frames. So that's like nothing compared to, like the 100 milliseconds I was testing out with. And it's just not acceptable for a fast-paced fighting style game. So that was kind of when I realized like we got to rely on someone that's a little more experienced here and look to use an add-on. So.
And are you using the other tools like Tick Interpolator, of course, Rollback Synchronizer, and State Machines? What flavors of all those things are you using?
It's a pretty basic Netfox setup, if you will. So it's just the Rollback Synchronizer and Tick Interpolator, and all I'm syncing is the position and velocity, and then one other variable that pertains to preventing players from ceiling hovering. Since you can fly, I didn't want people to just sit up at the ceiling and no one could burst their bubbles. So it's only 3 variables that are being synced.
I mean, that's super cool, right? You've got this whole thing and it's just 3 variables, right? And you can just get away with the basics. Let's do this one. I want to do the hardest level and see how, yeah.
This one's pretty cool. All right. So funny enough, most of the levels at the end now, which are the harder levels, were the first levels I made. So like because I was just so used to like flying around all the time, I was like, oh yeah, this is really easy. Like I needed to have those spikes for obstacles and stuff. But then as I noticed new players playing it, they would just be dying constantly in the beginning. They go back and make those easier levels for the beginning levels.
That's probably a common I don't know, trope or experience with game devs is that you'll design the end game challenges and then you work your way backwards, I guess.
Right. Another thing is,
oh, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Sorry, you're saying.
Oh no. Honestly, I lost my train of thought. That's on me though.
Oh, the spikes are back. Oh, I almost just.
So how does the responsiveness feel to you?
Fine,
Like
perfectly fine.
Yeah,
Perfectly
3
fine.
frames of input delay. If you play locally, it definitely feels a little bit more responsive, but I also have a lot more experience playing it, so think about it. It might be something only I notice, really. But
oh, wait, I got you.
yeah.
I thought you for sure had. So how?
Oh, do I still have 2 bubbles for you?
No, you only have 1.
Yeah, you did get me. Yeah.
Yeah, I did get you. Yeah.
I was like, oh, did it not? Did the RPC not work?
I didn't think I was. I thought you had me. That's why it maybe there was like the impact there looked like you had the upper hand.
You got me with the spike.
Oh,
maybe.
Let's talk about the game architecture for a second. So you have your game client, which is what you ship from Steam, what everybody downloads. But what about the rest of it? What's in your system architecture? Paint me a picture of what that looks like.
Yeah, so hopefully this answers your question. So it is peer-to-peer, and it relies on Steam's relay servers, right? So I use GodotSteam add-on and the Espresso Bits SteamMultiplayerPeer. So that The latter is responsible for the actual handshake connectivity between peers. And then GodotSteam is used for that lobby system that I have. So I kind of knew that with this being a $4.99 game, that paying for a server somewhere probably didn't make a lot of sense, even though it might have been beneficial to have a server. But the game runs really well at 100 to 130 milliseconds of latency. So for a game that's running at 60 frames per second, is very fast paced and collision based, and is peer to peer, I think that's pretty awesome, and like big testament to Netfox and what Element Bound did with the add-on.
I'm happy that I asked this question because I'm getting a lot of traction lately on some of my older videos about GodotSteam and SteamMultiplayerPeer and the P2P aspects. And the questions are, is this still viable? Is this still working? So for everyone that's watching, to answer your question, yes, we have proof that you can use the Espresso Bits version, the extension version of the multiplayer libraries, and you can use the Steam P2P network. So I'm super excited that you used Steam's lobby system, right? You use Steam's lobby, and then you're using the Espresso Bits Steam MultiplayerPeer extension, and that just seamlessly works, right? Like, did you have any hangups with that? Like, how did that process go of integrating that?
No, I found Michael Macha. I think that might be how you pronounce his last name. He's the creator of the Espresso Bits add-on. He has a YouTube playlist out there for implementing it, and I don't think it has gotten really a lot of traction, but I found it to be just super helpful. And I mean, he has an example project that has all the code in it too. So I was able to really follow along, and that's kind of how I learned how to make the handshakes necessary. And it also expanded a lot of my knowledge on signals too, believe it or not, because he has a lot of good signal work in there. But and then of course you do still need to use GodotSteam for the lobby system, which we don't really have to get on that whole topic of having to rely on Steam's API or Steam's documentation, because that's not the easiest. But the GodotSteam add-on, Steam add-on itself is pretty incredible stuff. I mean, and Gramps, the creator of that, I mean, he's really just in general, all add-on creators, incredibly nice and generous people. And he's very active in his Discord too. So if you have questions about GodotSteam, you can hop in that Discord, and the documentation is incredible too. So
yeah, those guys at GodotSteam and the Espresso Bits guys, I think there's a couple developers maintaining that. They're great. They're fantastic. And like you said earlier, like with Netfox, they're like that too. They're willing to, lend a hand anytime they can. Shameless plug. I do have a video and I do have a demo project on those exact topics, the integration between Espresso Bits. So definitely check out Michael Macha's. And if you need another resource, I also have that anybody can go and take a look at. So while you were kind of figuring this out, what made you decide to go with Steam versus some other thing? Was it really about free servers at this point and having that P2P functionality?
It was mainly about the free server aspect of it, and it also just seemed to have enough resources for that I could just pick it up and implement it right into my game. So because I don't have a big networking or technical background other than my couple of years of data analytics, having to host a dedicated server somewhere and all that is just not really something I even felt like looking into. So yeah, and of course the big thing about the peer-to-peer is it's free. So I think that's probably the number one factor for me.
And you'll have to report back after like 3 or 6 months. I want to see how you're doing and how that network's holding up, because that's something that we get asked a lot about. Is this viable? Is this a viable product? And you're here to basically say, yeah, it's working.
Yeah, definitely.
So what were some of the like most challenging parts? I know you talked to that a minute ago, and you said, lag compensation. Was there anything else during your game development, that whole process that kind of stuck out as, this was definitely a challenge here?
I did find UI implementation a little bit challenging at first, actually. I'm sure a lot of people go through that. But once I kind of got the hang of it, it came relatively quickly. I do still have some minor annoyances with trying to, like, let's say, in my game, I populate a icon above the players' heads with their Steam names. And like, you have to be very particular about how you're going to center that icon after you populate it with text, while also making sure the player doesn't see it center. So you have to be creative, at least there's maybe a workaround I'm just not aware of, but I had to be creative with how I would hide that label before it was centered, so it wouldn't be centered in front of the actual player. So just little things like that, kind of minor annoyances I found with the UI, but overall, it's a pretty good UI system. Of course, I don't have the experience in Unity or Unreal to compare it to another engine, but it seems relatively user-friendly.
What were your most reliable resources, like your go-to, were you looking at Godot documentation, or was there like a YouTuber or, something out there that really stood out to you?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, to initially learn the engine, I watched the Clear Code tutorial. So that's recommended on Godot's website. Most people watching this video are probably a little bit past that phase, but that was super helpful. And then, I would just be checking a lot of the documentation. I find it very helpful that you can look at that documentation within the engine itself. So just to kind of learn about all the built-in methods and everything, I found super helpful. Usually what I would do is like I kind of mentioned, that I would just map out everything I wanted in my game. And if I would get stuck on a particular thing, like how do I make the players bounce off each other? I might start YouTubing like shapecast collisions and see if I can learn. So there wasn't really ever a particular YouTuber necessarily for those types of things. I would just kind of hop in and see what tutorials I could find on player movement in this example and go from there and then implement it into my game. But again, since I'm kind of a kinesthetic learner, it's way better for me to do it that way than like just sort of watch tutorial after tutorial and then months later try to implement something. Like I have to kind of do it right then to really learn it. But other than that, I did find, all of your Netfox videos super helpful as well. So when I was getting introduced to Netfox, yeah, that was a huge resource and what ended up overall convincing me to use the add-ons. And of course, Michael Macha's playlist too for implementing the Espresso Bits, super helpful. As this is sort of another topic, but I would occasionally use AI too. I found that when I first started out in April of last year, I was mainly just using the free version of ChatGPT occasionally. It really did not work for Godot at that point, in my opinion, at least. And then over time, if I ever had a question about maybe the best way to implement a process, I might throw my code in there and say, hey, am I doing this the most optimized way? This is like within the last couple months, as I guess had more time to learn Godot. And sometimes it would help me optimize things, which I found super helpful too. So I would say definitely like leverage the AI, don't have it write your whole game for you. That's probably not going to work. You're probably not going to make a very good game. But I think we're kind of at the point where I always like to make the analogy that you kind of have to know how to do math to use a calculator. And I feel like you kind of have to know how to make a game to use AI for game coding right now. So, it's not going to really be able to make a full game for you just yet. Maybe 10, 20 years down the line that'll happen. But yeah, don't be afraid to leverage it.
Where did you get your game assets from? I know you have like a retro style in there. So like which parts did you make and which parts did you have to contract out? I'm assuming you had to do that.
Yes, I hired out for art and sound. And the way that I approached it was I'm going to, scroll through Fiverr and look for different pixel artists that have a similar style that I like. And I'm going to find 3 of them. Okay. I'm going to give each one of them just a small task, like depending on their price, this may be like $10 to $50, like just one frame of an animation or something. And I'm going to have them all do the same exact task with the same guidelines. And then based on my experience with them, like, hey, did they do what was asked? Did they deliver on time? Were a lot of revisions necessary? And was the overall art what I'm looking for? And so I was able to narrow it down between the 3 that I picked and find a really good freelancer that's located in Brazil who did all of the character art and level art. But primarily I did all the power-up art and some of the environment art too. But I didn't have a pixel art background either. So it's something I kind of learned along the way. And I would also say, like, if you want to make a game, let's maybe not spend 6 months to a year perfecting your pixel art craft, because that's going to take up a lot of your dev time, right? So there's certainly a benefit to having the skill, but if your main focus is getting a game out, like, rely on others if it's within your budget, right? But I did a similar process with the sound too. So I picked three freelancers that I thought had a good, like, chiptune vibe, as they call it, the SNES style, and gave them a small task like, here, make this sound effect, and then narrowed it in on one and The sound guy did an awesome job. I'm a little annoyed of the song because I've heard it so many times at this point, the battle song, but I think it's still pretty good.
Okay, so I'll do online battle.
Yeah.
And then I see it.
Or if you want, it might. It's funny that I'm saying this, but you know, in case there is actually any lag and we don't want to represent Element Bound poorly, if you host, there will be like nothing showing for lag, but that's up to you.
We'll do this. We'll start here, and we'll report back to Element Bound if there's a problem.
All right, ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here we go. I don't have any of the music playing for it, so.
I'm recording it. I don't know if it's gonna pick up on it. I have a. Oh, I forgot you can wrap around.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. I thought it was
a simple game, right? But
yeah.
it's fun with like 4 especially.
Okay, so I'm riding the. Actually, I don't. Everything looks very smooth. I would if there was a lag. I don't know what's this. Is this a power up?
Speed power up, yeah. Well, I got the spike though.
Oh, I almost hurt myself. Oh, so I gotta avoid you. Okay. Yeah, if there's any lag, okay. If there was lag, I'm not.
Oh, we tied.
Oh, nice.
Oh, it gave you the win.
And I like how you have the spikes as like a level. You know, what do you call that? A level obstacle or something.
Yeah, I mean, so there's some levels, like more advanced levels, where the whole top is spikes.
Okay.
I have to like. Oh, you got me there.
Oh, it's a self-inflicted bubble pop. So you're blinking. Does that mean you're immune?
I'm invincible right now. Yeah.
Okay. So I have to be aware of that. All right.
Then I just got a spike too, so I'm gonna try to kill you with the spike. I'm telling you my strategy. But...
You're gonna try to impale me from from below.
I know it would be pretty painful in real life.
This actually looks and plays very well, and I love the death animation. It reminds me of Mario getting hit by something.
Yeah.
I don't know what hurt.
Yeah, right. So did you see the arrows on your end?
Yeah, I did. I totally saw that, and I think that I didn't.
Yeah, the level's closing in.
I saw it. So okay, so what was the arrow power up? And
yeah, so it's reverse gravity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's a lot more relative whenever there's like spikes on the ceiling, you know. But since we were just playing the basic level, it's you know maybe not the best level for it. But
what program did you use to develop some of the assets in the game?
So I use Sprite for the pixel art. It's essentially just a dedicated pixel art editor where they just built it from the ground up for pixel art. So it's really solid.
If you had to go back in time and rewrite this game, what would be something that you would do differently?
Yeah, it would definitely be, you know, I kind of touched on it earlier, but just planning out online multiplayer from the get-go. So now that I have the lens of like what is going to be easy to compensate for lag, right? So my next game, I do want it to be an online multiplayer game, but I'm thinking like, let's maybe not have collisions. Let's maybe be running at 30 frames a second. Let's just have it be a little bit less fast paced. And you know, I think it's certainly okay to make those 60 FPS or fast paced collision based games. I mean, you know, I guess I have proof that the Netfox add-on supports it well, right? But it does make it a little bit harder, you know, working through some of the caveats or workarounds just to make sure that stuff functions really well. So I was playing Ultimate Chicken Horse. When I was playing that game, I was like, wow, there's no collisions. Like this must have been so easy. It's basically I could have just made all area 2Ds, and when a player enters that area, boom, they're dead. It's as simple as that. There's no collisions that I have to worry about. So I'm a little bit like, from a lazy standpoint, I don't know, but I'm just like, I know what I can do to make things a little bit easier in the next game. That'll definitely be bringing in with me.
So what's next? Like, what do you plan on working on next? You've got this game, you know, you got that feather in your hat. Where do you go from here?
Yeah, so right now I'm just spending a little bit more time on marketing. So Global Battle has been picked up really just by one streamer so far, and it's an Indian streamer, which by the way, having someone that you've never met, or really four people that you've never met, play something you spent a year making and have a lot of fun with it, and getting to see that, through video is one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. So even if this thing, as soon as that happened, I kind of told myself, even if this thing doesn't sell at all, like that's a success, right? Because you should be making games to put fun on people's screens, basically. So I'm still contacting a lot of streamers right now and trying to get more traction, if you will, in different audiences. So I mean, I have different emails I'm sending out in like 14 or 16 different languages or something all over the world, right? That's sort of my big effort right now. But once that kind of comes to an end, what I'll likely do is start focusing on that next game, which I do already have kind of a prototype in mind. I think I might do something that's kind of like a cross between Excite Bike and Snake, like just the classic Snake game. I would like to kind of stick with the retro party game niche.
When you were looking into this game, did you create multiple prototypes at first, or how did you go about that process?
Yeah, so I actually just kind of started making this and I just knew it was the direction I wanted to go. I did originally have a single player mode that was kind of like the original balloon trip from Balloon Fight, where it's, for those of you that don't know, it's kind of like Flappy Bird, but I ultimately just thought the multiplayer was way more fun and just kind of solely focused on that. Um, but no, I didn't really prototype too much. Like I just kind of knew this is what I wanted to do. And I think me being a little bit naive was sort of a big benefit in the sense I was just like, nope, like I'm just gonna make this. Like this seems like a lot of fun. I just got like some immediate feedback from friends, which, probably it's a good idea to get some official play testers before, if you're gonna sink in a lot of money into hiring freelancers and stuff like that. But if you're just starting something smaller, like get some feedback from your friends, and if they have fun with it, then that's maybe something you want to roll with. But yeah, so not really too much prototyping for this one for me.
So what are you currently playing? What's your go-to game right now?
Yeah, so of course, as I mentioned, I do love retro games, right? I'm a really big tactics guy, so I'm actually playing Final Fantasy Tactics right now and doing a Ramza only run. So that's the main character of the game. For those of you that don't know, you can play with like 4 to 5 characters in your party. So just using Ramza is like a pretty fun challenge that you can do. So I always love doing challenge runs. I recently did a Pokemon Yellow Pikachu only challenge run where I got through the elite was it Elite Four or Elite Eight? I'm actually blinking. At the end, without without using potions or ethers. So ethers refill your ability to do an attack, right? But
Right.
yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I also occasionally will get back into Balatro. I played quite a bit of that. So this is pretty fun because you can fly from the top or like screen wrap from the top
Oh,
of the
okay.
wall.
Oh, I got to be careful. I don't just. This is going to be such a great team game, like a 2v2 tournament kind of thing. Like I totally see this getting super competitive. Oh man,
Yeah, 2v2 is a lot of fun. That's the probably my preferred way to play. But yeah.
self.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to push S to go down. Yeah.
Yep.
I
I get
think
that a lot.
and now it's reversed, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, almost had you.
Now you got the ball too. Yeah, so I should have talked about that, but I specifically decided not to allow players to go down.
I love that was your that game mechanic came into play, and then you realize like you probably tried it. Oh man, I'm awful.
I did. No, you're good.
So did you try that? Let's talk about that for a second. So did you try that mechanic out, and then you were like, you know what, this is going to be a lot more competitive if I remove that? How did you come up
Yeah,
with that?
exactly. So like pretty much everyone that plays this game has actually told me like, gosh, like I keep wanting to go down, and I'm like, Well, you want to go down because you're in a vulnerable position, or it would help you out, right? So when you're giving your player the power to fly, you're gonna have to nerf them somehow, right? So if you
Yeah.
gave them the ability to also go down and not be sort of exposed for a bit before they go down, then it just makes it even harder for people to pop their bubbles, right? So I've specifically decided not to allow players to go down.
I think that was clutch. I think that's a clutch mechanic.
Thank
Oh,
you. Oh, there you go.
you let me have that.
No, I really didn't. So something that I absolutely want to include in the next game is to have more systems in place because there's really not any systems for the most part in Bubble Battle. It's just kind of a simple party game, right? So I do really enjoy games like Balatro that lets you so you sort of build up a system through the deck that you build throughout a run, and then if you build it up well enough, you can basically break the game. So people, I don't know if you're familiar with Balatro, but they'll get scores that are in scientific notation. So so like I would like to have, I don't know if I'm going to be able to design something that goes that to that level, but I would like to have some kind of system that like adds some deck building or whatever into the next game and have a little bit more like I have envision a single player mode that's got like some a little bit of procedural generation and stuff like that and allows you to level up your character in certain ways and so it's different each time you play and maybe if you level up enough, like you've basically broken the game and it's super easy. Because I think that's one of the funnest feelings as a player actually is like haha, like I broke this. This is so easy now. So I would like to give my players the ability to do something like that in the next one. Yeah, I would say just my main advice would be if you're interested in making a game, just make a damn game. Because, if I can do it, you probably can because it really there's so many resources out there now that like you don't have to have a ton of experience necessarily. And to the more experienced developers that might be watching this, like also don't bog yourself down. Like it's really easy to sort of like continue to think about, oh, well, I need to optimize this process this way, or oh, I need to learn about the most efficient way to do this before I get started. And you kind of get stuck in like a tutorial hell or an optimization hell or whatever you want to call it. And then before you know it, like 6 months have gone by and you've gotten like nowhere in your game. Um, so just kind of push through it and just make the damn game, if you're interested in doing it.
Great advice. And as a follow-up question, do you think that you feared this? Were you nervous about the release of this? Like on the scale of like 1 to 10, where were you on like freaking out to just like whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I haven't thought too much about it. I wasn't super nervous because I thoroughly tested it a lot before it was released. I mean, obviously, there's still going to be some bugs that you just never really considered looking for, but so yeah, I wasn't too nervous about it. I didn't put a lot of pressure on this being like a huge financial success or anything. It's certainly doing okay, but this was mainly just like I wanted to develop the skills to make a game, and I figured I would be able to do that the best by actually making one. And it feels really accomplishing to sort of see that Steam page, like when I watch the trailer on my Steam page, it usually still puts a little smile on my face. I'm like, yeah, it looks like fun. Steam capsules are very important. You'll hear a lot. So because that's like your book cover, right? And if someone's browsing on Steam, all they're seeing is that little book cover, and it needs to really stand out and represent your game well.
What are some high-level strategies that you'd like to share that maybe some newer developers can benefit from?
Invest in a good Steam capsule artist is, I think, some of the best advice. You'll hear that a lot or see that a lot if you kind of research best practices online, if you're just browsing through Reddit, stuff like that. And then as far as actually, doing outreach or getting wish lists, etc., like definitely do a Steam Next Fest. If you can, get your demo out well before the Next Fest and have a really good polished demo. That's something that I probably could have done a little bit better is had my demo be a little bit more polished at that point. But given that I kind of gave myself the time constraint of only making this within a year, I had kind of just gotten the Netfox implemented enough to where I could do a two-player online demo. So that's what I did for my actual demo version. But get that thing out as early as possible in advance of the Steam Next Fest you're doing, and absolutely do a Steam Next Fest is another thing. And then do what you can to just post on Reddit and share with as many people as you can, like just the Godot. It's a very supportive community. I've had some people that I've come in contact with in like the Netfox Discord even buy my game. I definitely appreciate that. As far as just the general kind of marketing outreach goes, like through email, you can hop onto YouTube and get streamers emails and then just send them out like, hey, here's in my case, 4 free copies of the game. And, I really appreciate what you're doing. I love X, Y, and Z videos that you've made or whatever, how specific you want to be. And, try to make it personal and connect with them a little bit. And just say, like, hey, this hasn't been shown much yet. I'd be super honored if you would feature it on your channel. And, 99% of the time, you're not going to get a response. But it only takes that one response to make your game pop off. So, um, the streamer that picked it up in India, I think they probably have about 300K subscribers or something. So it got a pretty good amount of views and resulted in some good traction for the game in India. I'm still trying to reach other audiences right now, so I have not considered paying streamers just yet. I might in the future. That's certainly an option if you don't get anywhere with just sending out free keys because keep in mind a lot of these streamers that have like millions of subscribers, like they're not gonna probably play your first game that you made if even if you just give them a free copy, because they're used to having people say like here's thousands of dollars to put something on your channel. So keep that in mind too. But the first game you make is probably unless you're lucky like the Balatro creator or Stardew Valley creator, like it's probably not going to be a huge success. But I think it's just a really good experience to understand how everything works with getting a game released on Steam and just kind of be a little bit humble about the return you're going to get on the time that you spent. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I've sent out probably like 300-400 emails, I think, to
Yeah.
different streamers, and I just share 4 keys in each one. And I've gotten responses from more than them, but they're just the only ones that have actually streamed it so far.
Before we go, let's talk about GodotCon for a minute.
But yeah, no, it was really nice for me, especially to just kind of have that camaraderie with a lot of different game devs. And, I live in Phoenix and I met a couple other game devs there that are located in Phoenix too. So now I've got some friends back in my hometown, which is nice that, since I don't come from a game development or a super technical background, I don't have a lot of connections that I can talk about RPCs with and, all that stuff. So it was really nice to just have that sort of camaraderie. And then there were a lot of big names were there that gave some excellent talks as well, and I was able to really benefit from that. Dave Snopek, for example, was there, and some of the other people involved with the Godot Foundation. So it was a great time. I also I did give a lightning talk as well, so you can be on the lookout for that when that's released. It was about time management and game development. So if you like some of the things I was talking about defining a process and sticking to a plan, then a lot of that's talked about in there. But yeah, you definitely got to get out there next year.
Yeah, that's the goal. And you gave a talk, a lightning talk. Like, how did you sign up for that? Like, how did you even think to do that? Like, what was that like?
It's really funny. So I have a little whiteboard that I set goals out for myself at the beginning of the year or like every few months or so. And before GodotCon was even announced in coming to Boston, I actually had a goal of giving a speech at GodotCon. I just assumed it would be in Europe again, probably in October. Then I found out about the Boston one, and I was like, well, now that's a lot cheaper of a trip. I can just go to Boston. That's great. And then I just put in an application. I kind of thought like, okay, I'm a little bit less of an experienced developer. What could I maybe bring to the table that someone else isn't going to talk about, or maybe something that, a strength that I think I could really help share with people. So I decided to talk about time management, and it was a great experience. I work remotely, so I'm usually just kind of like talking on Zooms most of the time. So it was a little interesting when I looked up and there were like, I might be overestimating, but maybe like a few hundred people in the room. And I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this. And then, a little nervous at first, but then just kind of like buckled down and got into it. And I thought it was fun. Yeah, so there was I wish I knew the speaker's name, but there was a multiplayer talk that a person responsible for adding multiplayer to Dome Keeper, but pretty successful game. And so it was really cool just seeing a sort of more experienced developer do exactly what I did, where, you know, this person is, I want to say was probably in their late 30s or early 40s or something, and had spent a long time working in netcode. And they were essentially doing what I did, which was take a local multiplayer game and add multiplayer into it, online multiplayer. So getting to see that perspective was super beneficial to me. Even though my game's already done, it was just a really cool learning experience for me. So lot of really smart people, a lot of great talks for sure.
Well, thanks for chatting with me today. This has been a amazing experience. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for providing all this insight. I'm sure it'll be helpful to many, and I'm looking forward to the success of Bubble Battle. So if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. I'm gonna put some links down in the description. And yeah, I thanks for hanging out with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, again, thanks so much for having me. Really love what you're doing with the channel, and I've benefited a lot from it. So really great to be here. Oh, there's a ball. So here you go.
Okay, so what does that do?
You do not want to hit it because it's my
Don't
ball.
want to hit it.
Yeah. If you know, if
You
hit
did
the ball,
say that.
yeah. And you know, this really comes into play like when the levels like a little bit more enclosed, or at the end when the bubble closes in. You know, the ball becomes a much bigger threat. Oh,
I got stuck. Self kills. Look at that.
Yeah, there's an achievement called "Are You Okay?" and it's like 50 self kills or something.
So you already have achievements baked into this. This is great.